The Vrakthar had landed 30,000 warriors across North America. They expected to control the continent within a week. They expected the humans to mass their forces for one big battle. That was how every other species had fought. One glorious last stand that ended in slaughter. But the humans did not do that. General Derek Shaw stood in the ruins of what had once been a shopping mall outside Chicago. His forces had retreated here after the initial contact. 200 soldiers, tired and bloody, but still alive, still fighting. Captain Claire Adams came to him with a report. "Sir, the enemy is advancing in a column formation. 1,500 warriors heading straight for our position." Shaw looked at the map. The Vrakthar were moving fast and hard, confident in their strength. They had good reason to be confident. Their warriors could run 40 miles per hour. Their armor could stop most bullets. Their claws could tear through concrete. "How long until they reach us?" Shaw asked. 20 minutes. Shaw nodded. "Then we have 15 minutes to not be here." He gave the order to move. His soldiers grabbed their weapons and disappeared into the ruined city. They did not run away from the enemy. They moved around them, silent and fast, like ghosts in the rubble. When the Vrakthar column arrived at the mall, they found nothing. No humans, no bodies. Just empty buildings and silence. The Vrakthar commander was confused. The prey had been here. He could smell them. Where had they gone? Then the explosion started. Bombs buried in the road detonated under the rear of the column. Rockets streaked from the windows of distant buildings. Sniper fire cracked from a dozen different directions at once. 30 Vrakthar fell in the first 10 seconds. The rest scattered, trying to find cover, trying to identify where the attacks were coming from. But by the time they organized a response, the humans were gone again. This happened again and again, all across the continent. Vrakthar forces would advance toward a human position. The humans would retreat before they arrived. Then the attacks would come from behind, from the sides, from everywhere and nowhere. The Vrakthar could not understand it. Why did the humans not stand and fight? Why did they keep running? It was cowardly. It was dishonorable. It was infuriating. But it was also working. Dr. Ethan Price was not a soldier. He was a scientist, a xenobiologist who had spent his career studying alien life forms from the few samples humanity had collected over the years. Now he worked in a bunker, deep underground, analyzing everything they could learn about the Vrakthar. He called General Shaw on a secure channel. Something important. Shaw listened as Price explained. The Vrakthar had a weakness. Their biology required them to enter a dormant state for 12 hours every 48 hours. It was like sleep, but deeper. During this time, they were completely helpless. If they did not get this rest, their minds would start to break down. "They need to sleep," Shaw said slowly, "and we do not." "Not like they do," Price confirmed. "Humans can work in shifts. We can stay awake for days if we need to. We can rotate our forces so someone is always fighting, always watching, always attacking. They cannot do that." Shaw felt a grin spread across his face. It was not a nice grin. He implemented what he called the harassment protocol. Every human unit was given one simple order. Never let the Vrakthar rest. Attack them during the day, attack them at night. Use drones, use snipers, use explosives, use anything and everything to keep them awake. The effects showed within 2 weeks. Vrakthar warriors started making mistakes. They walked into ambushes. They failed to notice traps. They became slow and clumsy, their perfect reflexes degrading from exhaustion. By the end of the first month, some Vrakthar units simply collapsed. Their warriors fell into forced dormancy right in the middle of combat, unable to stay awake any longer. Human soldiers moved in and finished them while they slept. Colonel Adams led one such operation outside what remained of Indianapolis. Her team of 50 soldiers surrounded a Vrakthar camp. where 200 warriors had finally succumbed to exhaustion. They lay in the ruins of a factory, motionless, their massive bodies sprawled across the concrete floor. "It feels wrong," one of her soldiers whispered. "Killing them in their sleep. They came here to eat us. They came here to feed our children to their larvae. They have done this to 47 other species." She raised her rifle. "This is not murder. This is pest control." The gunfire lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, 200 Vrokthar were dead, and not a single human had been scratched. Back on the Vrokthar flagship, High Commander Vorax received the reports with growing disbelief. His forces were dying, not in glorious battle, but in their sleep, not to superior weapons, but to exhaustion and harassment. The humans were picking his army apart, piece by piece. "This is impossible," he growled. "They are prey. They should be running. They should be hiding. They should be begging for mercy." His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Kreth, spoke carefully. "High Commander, perhaps we underestimated them. Perhaps we should call for the reserve fleets." Vorax turned on him with fury in his eyes. "Call for help? Against these insects? We are Vrokthar. We are the masters of the galaxy. We do not call for help." But the situation continued to deteriorate. In space, Admiral Cole was executing a similar strategy against the Vrokthar fleet. His ships were smaller and faster than the enemy vessels. They could not win a direct fight, so they did not try. Instead, they attacked supply ships. They ambushed patrol craft. They hit and ran over and over, never giving the Vrokthar a chance to bring their superior firepower to bear. Lieutenant Commander Kyle Bennett became famous for a raid on a Vrokthar supply convoy. His little corvette, the Hornet, destroyed 12 cargo ships carrying food and ammunition for the ground forces. He lost half his crew in the attack, but the enemy lost enough supplies to feed 10,000 warriors for a month. When asked about the losses, Bennett just shrugged. They lost more. It was not pretty. It was not honorable. But it worked. By the end of the second month, the Vrokthar had lost half their ground forces and a quarter of their fleet. They controlled no territory. They held no cities. Every time they tried to establish a base, the humans would appear from nowhere, cause chaos, and vanish again. Vorax finally understood what he was facing. These humans were not like the other species he had conquered. They did not fight to win glory. They did not fight to protect their honor. They fought to survive, and they would do anything, absolutely anything to achieve that goal. He looked at the tactical display, showing his dying army, and made a decision. For the first time in 6,000 years, a Vrokthar commander would order a retreat. But as he gave the command, he knew it was already too late. The humans were not going to let them leave. The humans were going to follow them. The Vrokthar fleet began its retreat on the 92nd day of the invasion. 200 warships had arrived at Earth. Only 123 remained. The rest were scattered wreckage floating in orbit, destroyed by human weapons that should not have existed. High Commander Vorax watched his fleet limp toward the wormhole gate that would take them home. He had never tasted defeat before. It was bitter. It was shameful. But he told himself it did not matter. The Vrokthar Empire had thousands of ships. They would return with a force so large that these humans could not possibly resist. He was still telling himself this when the human fleet appeared behind him. Admiral Nathan Cole had been waiting for this moment. For 3 months, he had kept his main battle fleet hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. He had let the enemy think they were winning in space. He had let them believe his orbital platforms and small attack craft were all he had. Now he showed them the truth. 400 human warships emerged from behind the moon in perfect formation. They were not as big as Vrokthar vessels. They were not as heavily armored. But there were many of them, and they were fresh, and their crews were hungry for payback. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole," he announced over the fleet channel. The enemy is retreating. We are not going to let them. They came to our home to eat our children. Now we teach them what happens when you threaten humanity. The human fleet accelerated toward the Vrokthar. Cole watched his tactical display as the two forces closed the distance. The enemy was disorganized, tired, demoralized. His people were angry and ready. It was not even close to a fair fight. Lieutenant Commander Kyle Bennett led the first attack wave. His corvette, the Hornet, had been repaired and reinforced after the supply convoy raid. He had a new crew, young and eager to prove themselves. "Target their engines," Bennett ordered. "Do not let any of them reach that wormhole." The Hornet dove toward a Vrokthar battlecruiser, dodging plasma fire with moves that should have been impossible. Bennett had learned to fly in Earth's asteroid belt, threading through rocks the size of buildings at high speed. Compared to that, enemy fire was easy. His gunner, Ensign Nicole Grant, found her target. 6 missiles streaked toward the battlecruiser's engine section and detonated against the unarmored thruster ports. The massive ship went dark and began to drift. All across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human ships were smaller, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They struck at weak points and retreated before the Vrokthar could respond. They worked together in perfect coordination, communicating instantly through quantum-linked systems. The Vrokthar fought like individuals. Each captain sought personal glory, trying to destroy enemy ships on their own. They did not share information. They did not coordinate their fire. They had never needed to. Humans fought like a pack. Every ship knew what every other ship was doing. They concentrated fire on single targets, overwhelming enemy shields with focused attacks. When one ship was damaged, others covered its retreat. Within 2 hours, 60 more Vrokthar warships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 63 made a desperate push for the wormhole gate. Only 41 made it through. On Earth, Secretary General Laura Mitchell received the news of the victory with grim satisfaction. The Vrokthar would return with more ships, more warriors, more determination to destroy the species that had humiliated them. Unless humanity struck first. She called a meeting of the highest military and scientific leaders. Admiral Cole attended via hologram from his flagship. General Shaw was there in person, still covered in dust from the battlefield. And Dr. Diane Porter, head of the Secret Bioweapons Division, presented her work. "We have been developing this for 15 years, Porter explained. "It is a virus specifically designed to attack Vrokthar biology. It disrupts their ability to digest food. An infected Vrokthar will slowly starve to death, no matter how much they eat." The room was silent. Everyone understood what she was proposing. Shaw spoke first. "How many will it kill?" "If we deploy it effectively, millions, possibly billions. It spreads through physical contact and can survive on surfaces for weeks." Admiral Cole's hologram flickered as he leaned forward. "You want to commit genocide." Porter did not flinch. "They came here to harvest us, to feed us to their young. They have exterminated 47 species, billions of sentient beings, wiped from existence, so the Vrokthar could breed more soldiers to conquer more worlds." She looked at each person in the room. "This is not genocide. This is self-defense. If we do not destroy them, they will destroy us. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but eventually they will come back with enough force to finish what they started." Mitchell made the decision. Do it. The plan was simple but effective. Human forces had captured several Vrokthar supply ships during the battle. These ships were repaired, loaded with the virus, and sent back to the enemy fleet as if they were survivors of the battle. The Vrokthar, desperate for supplies, welcomed them without question. Within weeks, the virus had spread through every ship that had escaped Earth. Those ships carried it back to Vrokthar space, to colonies and outposts, and the homeworld itself. By the time the Vrakthar realized what was happening, it was too late. The virus had spread to every corner of their empire. Millions were already sick. The breeding pits, where larvae fed on harvested prey, became death traps as infected adults passed the virus to the next generation. High Commander Vorax was one of the first to show symptoms. He felt his strength failing, his body consuming itself no matter how much he ate. As he lay dying in his quarters, he finally understood the truth about humans. They were not prey. They had never been prey. They were predators, just like the Vrakthar. But they were a different kind of predator. They did not kill for glory or honor. They killed to survive. And they would use any weapon, any tactic, any strategy to ensure their survival. The Vrakthar had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked a species that was willing to burn the galaxy down rather than be conquered. Now they were paying for that mistake. On Earth, General Shaw received reports of the virus spreading through enemy space. He felt no joy in the news, only grim determination. "This is not over," he told Colonel Adams. "We hurt them badly, but they are not finished yet. As long as any Vrakthar survive, they will want revenge." Adams nodded. "So what do we do?" Shaw looked at a star map showing Vrakthar territory. Hundreds of worlds, spread across a quarter of the galaxy. An empire built on the bones of dead civilizations. "We go out there," he said. "We find every world they control. We free every species they have enslaved. And we make sure the Vrakthar never threaten anyone ever again." It was the same kind of smile Shaw had given when the war started. Not nice, not gentle, just determined. "When do we leave?" "As soon as the fleet is ready." Humanity had spent 300 years preparing to defend their home. Now they would spend however long it took to make sure they never had to defend it again. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The human fleet entered Vrakthar space on a cold morning in January, 1 year after the invasion of Earth. 400 warships carried 2 million soldiers through the wormhole network, heading toward the heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 6,000 years. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Relentless and watched the stars change as they traveled deeper into enemy territory. He was older now, his hair completely white, his face lined with exhaustion. But his eyes were still sharp, and his determination had not wavered. "First target coming up," reported Captain Ryan Torres from the tactical station. "Vrakthar Colony World, population estimated at 50 million. Cole studied the data. The colony had minimal defenses. Most of the Vrakthar fleet had been recalled to protect the homeworld, leaving their outer territories vulnerable. "What about the other species?" Cole asked. "The ones they conquered?" Torres checked his records. "Intelligence says this world has about 30 million slaves from a species called the Kalori. Small, peaceful people. The Vrakthar used them for labor and food." Cole felt his jaw tighten. Food. The Vrakthar ate sentient beings like humans ate cattle. They had done it for thousands of years, and they saw nothing wrong with it. "Prepare the ground forces," he ordered. "We are going to liberate that world." The battle for the colony lasted 3 days. The Vrakthar defenders fought hard, but they were weakened by the virus and demoralized by months of defeat. Human soldiers pushed through their lines with relentless pressure, never stopping, never resting, just like they had learned during the defense of Earth. General Derek Shaw led the assault on the main Vrakthar stronghold. His troops blasted through the walls and found something that made even hardened soldiers pause: the breeding pits. Thousands of Kalori prisoners were held in underground chambers, waiting to be fed to Vrakthar larvae. Many were already dead, their bodies half consumed. Others were barely alive, their eyes empty from years of horror. Shaw ordered his medics forward. "Get these people out of here, all of them. I do not care how long it takes." A young Kalori, barely more than a child, grabbed Shaw's hand as the soldiers carried her to safety. She looked up at him with huge, dark eyes filled with confusion. "Who are you?" she asked in broken galactic common. Why do you help us? Shaw knelt down to her level. We are humans. We came from a planet called Earth. The Vrakthar tried to do to us what they did to your people. And you survived? We did more than survive. And now, we are here to make sure they never hurt anyone again. The Kelori child stared at him like he was some kind of miracle. To her, he probably was. Her people had been Vrakthar prey for 300 years. They had forgotten what freedom looked like. News of the liberation spread across the galaxy. Other conquered species heard about the humans who had defeated the Vrakthar. They heard about the soldiers who freed slaves and treated former prey with kindness and respect. And they began to hope. On a dozen worlds, slave populations rose up against their Vrakthar masters. They did not have weapons or training, but they had numbers and desperation. Many died, but for every rebellion crushed, 2 more started. The human fleet moved from world to world, liberating colonies and recruiting allies. The Kelori, despite their peaceful nature, volunteered to serve as scouts and translators. The Torvik, a species of powerful warriors who had been conquered 500 years ago, took up arms again and joined the human advance. Within 2 years, humanity had freed 23 worlds and built a coalition of 8 species. The Vrakthar Empire, once the greatest power in the galaxy, was crumbling. Colonel Claire Adams received a promotion to general during the campaign. She commanded the ground forces during the liberation of the Torvik homeworld, leading a charge through enemy lines that broke the Vrakthar defense and sent them running. A Torvik chieftain approached her after the battle. He was massive, even bigger than a Vrakthar, with gray skin and tusks like an elephant. His people had been slaves for generations, forced to fight in Vrakthar armies against their will. You fight well for small creatures, he rumbled. The Vrakthar told us you would be easy prey. They said you were weak, stupid, cowardly. Adams wiped blood from her face and grinned. The Vrakthar say a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. The chieftain studied her for a long moment. Then he did something his people had not done in 500 years. He bowed. My warriors will follow you, human. Where you lead, we will come, until every Vrakthar is dead or the stars themselves burn out. The coalition grew stronger with every victory. Species that had never worked together before united under human leadership. They shared intelligence, combined their fleets, coordinated their attacks. The Vrakthar, who had always ruled through fear and division, did not know how to fight an enemy that actually cooperated. 5 years into the campaign, the human fleet reached Vrakthar Prime. The enemy homeworld was heavily defended. Thousands of ships surrounded the planet, crewed by the last and most loyal Vrakthar warriors. They knew they were facing extinction. They would not surrender. Admiral Cole looked at the tactical display and felt the weight of the moment. Billions of lives depended on what happened next. If they failed here, the Vrakthar would rebuild and return. If they succeeded, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known would be ended forever. All ships, he announced. This is the final battle. The Vrakthar conquered the galaxy through terror and cruelty. They enslaved and devoured countless species. They tried to do the same to us. He paused, letting his words sink in. Today we end them. Not for revenge, not for glory, but so that no one ever has to fear them again. All ships, engage. The Battle of Vrakthar Prime lasted 7 days. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Human ships fought side by side with Torvik cruisers and Kelori support vessels. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together against a common foe. General Shaw led the ground invasion personally. His troops landed on the surface of Vrakthar Prime and began the long, bloody march toward the Imperial Palace. Every step was contested. Every building was a fortress. The Vrakthar fought with the desperation of a dying species. But humanity had been fighting desperate battles since before they discovered fire. They knew how to win when everything was against them. On the seventh day, Shah stood on the steps of the imperial palace. The last Vrokthar emperor, a massive creature covered in ceremonial armor, emerged to face him. "You have destroyed everything," the emperor said. "Our empire, our people, our future." Shah looked at the smoking ruins around them. The bodies of Vrokthar and human soldiers lay everywhere. The cost of victory had been terrible. "You did this to yourselves," he replied. "You came to our world. You tried to eat our children. You treated every other species in the galaxy like livestock." He stepped forward, his weapon raised. "We are not livestock. We never were. And now, neither is anyone else." The Emperor's surrender was broadcast across the galaxy. The war was over. The Vrokthar were defeated. But Shah knew that winning a war was only the beginning. Now came the harder task. 50 years had passed since the fall of the Vrokthar Empire. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted when the first alien warships appeared above Earth. The Galactic Council met in a massive space station, orbiting humanity's homeworld. Representatives from 62 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their voices filling the air with a dozen different languages, all translated instantly by advanced computers. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the central podium, preparing to address the assembly. He was a tall man in his 40s, with calm eyes and a steady voice. His grandfather had fought in the Battle of Chicago during the invasion. His mother had served aboard the Relentless during the Liberation Campaign. "Honored delegates," he began. "Today marks the 50th anniversary of first contact between humanity and the wider galaxy. It was not the beginning we would have chosen. The Vrokthar came to our world with warships and harvesting teams. They expected to add us to their list of conquered species." He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings who had once been slaves, who had once lived in fear, who had once believed that nothing could save them. They were wrong. In the gallery above, General Claire Adams sat with her granddaughter, Lieutenant Kelly Adams. Claire was old now, over 90, but her mind was still sharp and her spirit unbroken. She had commanded armies across 100 worlds. She had seen things that would haunt most people forever. But she had also seen things that gave her hope. Kelly leaned close to her grandmother. "What was it like during the invasion?" Claire thought about the question. Memories flooded back. The fear, the chaos, the terrible certainty that humanity might not survive to see another year. "It was the worst time in human history," she said, "and also the best. When everything was against us, we found out what we were really made of. We learned that we could face anything, as long as we faced it together." Ambassador Webb continued his speech. The Vrokthar believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had conquered 47 species. They had never lost a war. They had every reason to think that we would be just another meal for their breeding pits. He shook his head slowly. But they made a fundamental error. They assumed that because we were small and soft and seemingly weak, we would be easy to defeat. They did not understand that humans are not defined by our bodies. We are defined by our will. In a secure facility on the far side of the galaxy, the last Vrokthar lived out their lives under permanent quarantine. 3 worlds had been set aside for them. Enough space to survive, but not enough to ever rebuild their empire. Some called this mercy. The truth was somewhere in between. Dr. Ethan Price, now in his final years, had spent decades studying the Vrokthar. He had written countless papers on their biology, their culture, their history. His final work, published just months before the anniversary celebration, attempted to answer the question that had haunted him since the war. Why did the Vrokthar lose? His conclusion was simple but profound. The Vrokthar had evolved as apex predators on a world with no competition. They had never needed to cooperate, to innovate, to adapt. They conquered through raw strength and overwhelming numbers. When those tools failed them, they had nothing else to fall back on. Humanity had evolved differently. Earth was a death world, filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. Humans had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most adaptable. They learned to work together. They learned to think their way out of problems that strength alone could not solve. When the Vrokthar attacked, they awakened something ancient in humanity. Something that had been sleeping since the days when human ancestors chased prey across the African plains until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. Humans were persistent predators. They never gave up. They never stopped. They just kept coming, generation after generation, until the job was done. The Vrokthar had been apex predators in a galaxy full of herbivores. They had never encountered another carnivore before. When they finally did, they discovered that 6,000 years of easy conquest had made them soft, predictable, and ultimately vulnerable. Ambassador Webb reached the end of his speech. 50 years ago, we were alone. We faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations and devoured entire species. Today, we stand as part of a community of 62 worlds, united in peace and cooperation. He looked directly at the recording devices, knowing that his words would be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. We did not ask for this responsibility. We did not want to become the species that ended the Vrokthar threat. But when the challenge came, we rose to meet it. Not because we were the strongest or the most advanced, but because we refused to accept defeat. He spread his hands, encompassing the entire assembly. This is the lesson of the Vrokthar War. Any species can fall prey to fear and despair, but any species can also choose to stand up and fight. The galaxy does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to those who refuse to give up. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Humans and aliens alike rose to their feet, honoring the words and the history they represented. In the gallery, Callie turned to her grandmother. Do you think we did the right thing? With the Vrokthar, I mean, keeping them alive like that? Claire considered the question carefully. It was something she had wrestled with for decades. I do not know if it was right, she finally admitted, but it was human. We could have exterminated them completely. We had the power and the justification, but we chose to show mercy, even to creatures who had never shown mercy to anyone. She looked at her granddaughter with fierce pride. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us better. Not our weapons or our ships or our tactics. Our ability to choose compassion, even when destruction would be easier. Our ability to build instead of just destroy. Kelly nodded slowly. She served on a ship that patrolled the quarantine zone around the Vrokthar worlds. She had seen the creatures that had once terrorized the galaxy reduced to primitives, living in simple villages. Their empire nothing but a memory. It was sad in a way, but it was also justice. As the celebration continued, Admiral Cole's grandson stood before a memorial wall on the Relentless. The ship had been preserved as a museum, a reminder of the battles fought and won. The wall displayed the names of every human who had died during the Vrokthar War. Millions of names, etched in polished stone. Next to the human names were smaller sections, honoring the Kalori, the Torvik, and all the other species who had fought and died for freedom. Young Nathan Cole, named for his grandfather, traced his fingers across the names. He had never known a galaxy ruled by fear. He had grown up in an era of peace and cooperation, but he understood, looking at those names, what that peace had cost. His grandfather had once said that the true measure of a civilization was not how it treated its friends, but how it treated its enemies. Humanity had shown that it could be ruthless when survival demanded it. But it had also shown that it could be merciful when survival allowed it. The Vrokthar had thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had been wrong. Humanity had claimed that title long ago, on a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the cosmos. They had fought their way up from prey to predator through millions of years of evolution. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. And when the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known came knocking at their door, they had not hidden. They had not surrendered. They had opened that door and showed the universe exactly what they were made of. The Vrokthar had wanted to be remembered as conquerors. Instead, they would be remembered as a cautionary tale. The species that tried to eat humanity and learned, too late, that they had picked the wrong prey. History would remember the Vrokthar as the apex predators of the galaxy. But history would remember humanity as the ones who wiped them from existence. And across the stars, in every language and on every world, the lesson would be taught for generations to come. Never ever underestimate the humans. The Vrokthar had ruled the galaxy for 6,000 years. They were the biggest, the strongest, and the most deadly species anyone had ever seen. They stood 9 feet tall, with 4 arms and claws that could cut through metal. Their skin was like armor. Nothing could hurt them. Nothing could stop them. They had conquered 47 worlds. They had eaten entire civilizations. Every species they met either surrendered or died. Most of the time, they died anyway. The Vrokthar did not keep slaves. They kept food. High Commander Vorax stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the blue planet below. His officers called it a primitive world. The creatures living there had only just discovered space travel. They had no real weapons. They had no real ships. They were soft, weak, and small. Perfect prey. Vorax had conquered hundreds of worlds in his long life. He knew what would happen next. The small creatures would panic. They would fail. And then his warriors would harvest them for the breeding pits back home. Vrokthar larvae needed fresh meat to grow strong. He gave the order to broadcast the standard message: surrender your world, submit to harvest, resistance is extinction. The message went out on every frequency. Vorax waited for the response. Usually, the prey species would beg. They would offer tribute. They would promise anything to survive just a little longer. The response came back in a simple voice. A female spoke for the entire planet. We decline. Vorax felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Confusion. Did these creatures not understand? Did they not see the 200 warships in their sky? Did they not know what the Vrokthar were? He ordered his fleet to prepare the first wave of drop pods. 600 landing craft would descend on the major population centers. His warriors would show these humans what happened to species that refused to submit. The drop pods launched. They fell toward the planet like a rain of death. Vorax watched with satisfaction. This was the moment he loved most, the moment when hope died. Then the sky below lit up with fire. Nuclear weapons. Hundreds of them. They exploded across the upper atmosphere in a wall of flame that swallowed the drop pods whole. 600 landing craft vanished in less than 10 seconds. Vorax stared at the display in shock. That was not possible. Primitive species did not use nuclear weapons against invaders. The radiation would poison their own world. No sane creature would do that. But these humans had done it without hesitation. Before he could react, something else happened. Objects that had looked like dead satellites suddenly came alive. They were weapons platforms. They had been hidden among the space debris, waiting for this moment. Plasma cannons and missile batteries opened fire on the Vrokthar fleet. 3 warships exploded in the first volley. 2 more lost their engines. The fleet scattered in confusion, trying to understand what was happening. Admiral Nathan Cole watched the battle from the bridge of his ship. The Relentless. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his entire life preparing for this day. His father had prepared for it too, and his grandfather before that. 300 years ago, humanity had picked up the first signals from deep space. They had heard the screams of dying civilizations. They had decoded the warnings left behind by species that no longer existed. And they had learned about the Vraktar. For 3 centuries, humanity had prepared in secret. They built hidden weapons. They trained soldiers. They developed technologies they hoped they would never need to use. And they waited. Now the waiting was over. Lieutenant Megan Scott looked up from her station. "Sir, the enemy fleet is regrouping. They are preparing another assault." Cole nodded. "Good. Let them come. The orbital platforms were just the first surprise." On Earth, Secretary General Laura Mitchell stood in the Emergency Command Center, deep beneath the mountains. Screens showed the battle in space and the burning remains of the drop pods that had reached the atmosphere. Most had been destroyed, but some had gotten through. Vrakthar warriors were now on Earth's surface. General Derek Shaw appeared on one of the screens. He was a big man with a hard face and a voice like gravel. "We have contact in 12 locations: Denver, Houston, Atlanta, and 9 others. Enemy forces are establishing positions." Mitchell looked at the casualty reports already coming in. Thousands dead in the first hour. Much worse. "General, you have full authorization. Implement the persistence doctrine." Shaw smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Yes, ma'am. We have been waiting a long time for this." He turned to his officers in the command center. "All right, listen up. These things think they are the top predator in the galaxy. They have never lost a war. They have never met a species that could fight back." He pulled up a holographic display showing Vrakthar biology. "They are faster than us, stronger than us. Their armor is better than anything we have. In a straight fight, they win every time." Captain Claire Adams raised her hand. "Then how do we beat them?" Shaw changed the display to show human history. Ancient hunters chasing animals across the African plains. Soldiers marching through snow and desert. Men and women fighting in every terrain, in every condition, against every odd. "We do not fight straight," he said. "We evolved on a death world. Everything on Earth tried to kill us, and we killed it first. We did not become the dominant species by being the strongest or the fastest. We became dominant because we never stop. We never give up. We never quit." He looked at each of his officers in turn. "The Vrakthar conquer worlds in days. They expect quick victories and easy prey. But we are not prey. We are persistence hunters. Our ancestors chased animals until they dropped dead from exhaustion. We will do the same thing to these monsters." In orbit, Vorax received reports from the warriors who had reached the surface. The humans were fighting back. They were using weapons that should not exist on a primitive world. They were dying, yes, but they were taking Vrakthar with them. One of his officers approached. "High Commander, the prey is more dangerous than expected. Perhaps we should call for reinforcements." Vorax turned to face him. His eyes were cold. "Reinforcements? For this? They are insects. We will crush them." But deep down, something bothered him. Something felt wrong. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species fight like this. They did not run. They did not beg. They just kept fighting, even when they had no chance of winning. What kind of creature did that? He did not know it yet, but he had just asked the most important question in the history of his species. And the answer would destroy everything the Vrakthar had ever built. The humans were not afraid to die, and that made them more dangerous than any predator the galaxy had ever seen.